Hello, my name is Dennis Mark, and I am a modern-day abolitionist. That's who I am. But what I do is I am the task force coordinator for the Human Trafficking Rescue Alliance of the Southern District of Texas. And my role there is to coordinate the effort of 30 law enforcement agencies and training them on how to identify and investigate all types of human trafficking cases. I'm also responsible for coordinating the efforts of over 70 nonprofits in the area who provide services to victims. But that's not really where I come from. I don't have a law enforcement background. My role earlier on was in IT. And my journey started back in 2006 in an unexpected way. I was on mission in Turkey at the time and was exposed to early on what exploitation looked like. I was exposed to a criminal element there of trafficking that was going on in Istanbul that was controlled by the Russian mafia. And so my eyes at that point in time were opened. My whole perception of things had changed. It had looked like something completely different that I had never expected. And I think my journey and my exposure to that has been the story of almost everyone that I've ever worked with and the people that I meet every day that do this work. It's an incredible opportunity to reframe your mind and being exposed to the things that you thought were normal and okay and everything was happy and life was good. But there's a darkness that goes on in the world around us, and being exposed to that changes you. Needless to say, I was impacted in a way that really affected me in a way that I can't even really put into words. So oftentimes the women in the life will often say, well, I'm feeling a certain kind of way. And that's exactly how I felt. I came back from Turkey and started getting involved with an organization called redM Ministries. And in that process, for the next 14 years, my role there was to educate, bring awareness, but more importantly, to identify victims, work with those victims, try to find resources for those victims. My wife and I opened a safe house in 2010, addressing what we identified as needs. We were a solution-based organization that had identified very different needs. And so it began us on a journey of really understanding how this happens, why does this happen, and how does this affect the women that are involved in sex trafficking. So we became to understand the importance of trauma-informed care because the brain is affected severely by the trauma that they've been exposed to. And it goes deep, and it's hard to understand, it's hard to realize what that looks like. And so what we took from reaction molded us into an organization that was really responding in ways that we couldn't imagine. So we had to rethink how we did things. We had to rethink what we thought about how human beings respond to this trauma. We also had to understand that what our expectations looked like were different than the reality that we were exposed to. And Nat Ware's TED Talk in Oxford University, he talks about the expectation gap, that we live in a world where we have certain expectations and we are influenced by what we see on media. When you go to Google and you look at, and you do a search for something, you see only the top 10% of pictures that are actually we're exposed to. And so it sets our expectation on that reality. But when we actually are confronted with that expectation, oftentimes it doesn't even come close. And so for us, how we had to rethink is we had expectations that when we would rescue women or women would be brought to us, that they would be grateful and they would be happy. But the reality was that there was lots of pain there, lots of anger, lots of things that were unresolved. And me as a man, it really re-educated me into the concept that what most people believe is that, oh, these women enjoy this work. It's what men believe. That's why the buyers go out and think that this woman really enjoys this, because that's what the media tells them. And so that's their expectation, not seeing the reality of what the matter is and how it really affects us and how it affects them. We all carry our own certain levels of trauma, and so we have our own ideas about that. But when you're exposed to someone else's trauma, severe trauma, It really changes your perception. It changes the whole reality of the world that you're working in. Finally, the next thing is you have to reimagine, how do I work with people who can reimagine our response to this? How do we think outside the box? What we think is normal, and what I always say, it looks great on paper, doesn't really work in reality. So we have to really think about what that looks like. We have to reassess these things that we thought were normal. My partner in the task force, Sergeant Tony Gracia from HPD Vice, he says that what we know about trafficking changed 5 minutes ago. There's always a way we have to reimagine what we're doing. That's why one of the things I love about working with law enforcement is I've taken everything I've come to know and come to understand, and everything that I've learned and heard and experienced, and the feelings I get to train law enforcement now. I get to reframe their minds. From what used to work in vice operations doesn't work with victims of trafficking. I get to see the transformation happening, the reframing of their minds, the paradigm shifts that are occurring every day with law enforcement as they're coming to understand the victims that they're working with. I love the fact that when they're actually doing operations, they are consummate professionals in the way that they work with women. Now, the reality is, not all law enforcement understands that. But we are further down the road than we were 14 years ago when we first started with this, when nobody would really listen. And now law enforcement's listening. It's an amazing journey to be on, to really reimagine how things are possible if we just talk. My greatest joy in this whole work is the people that I get to meet and the people I get to work with, because there is such a strong collaborative effort in all that we do and all that we want to do and how we look at each other and we support one another. My friend David Batstone from Not for Sale campaign once said that we live in a nonprofit world as a society of co-opetition. It's the working together, but yet being independent of one another. And so it's now we're moving from that co-opetition into a real spirit of collaboration and looking at ways that can really change how things work. And that's an important aspect, just making sure things do work. So we have to also resolve ourselves to this work. Again, my background is IT, and so how do I go from an IT background to running a task force with no law enforcement experience? It's because my resolve was to make a difference. I could not accept what I had come to know. Once I had picked up the rock and looked under the rock, I couldn't put the rock down until I found a way for myself to resolve to find a solution for these things. It may not happen in my lifetime, but I am sure that I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that my influence is going to affect the next generation of people. I want to train people to understand this so that they too will have the resolve. Everyone that you have heard from today and you're going to hear from today have this. This is the one commonality that we all experience, that we have a resolve to do this work and to make sure that people are not only rescued, but they're healed. Because that's the real struggle for everyone. For the women that we deal with, and the children that we deal with, and sometimes even the men that we deal with, this never goes away. It never finishes. It's always going to be there. It's something they're always going to deal with. And so if we're going to commit ourselves to that kind of work, because they're going to be forever dealing with this, then we also have to have that same kind of resolve that we're going to be there in the tough moments so that no one will feel alone as they walk on their journey. It is so important that we understand the cognizant reality of what we're dealing with here, that we have to understand it, because you can't really engage in this fight unless you're fully aware of all the ramifications of what this thing does to people. You have to really grasp it. You have to understand it to a point where it changes your mind to this. It's what's happened to me. Years ago, had no clue. And now, this work is consuming. That's the dangerous aspect of this work, because you will be affected in a negative way. And it can affect you in a way that will drive you to a point of burnout. And so I'm very aware of that. That's one of the things that I actually do with my law enforcement is I'm watching them to see where are they, because they deal with all the darkness. They don't get to see the outcomes for a lot of the women that they've even worked with. And so how are they affected? I've worked with nonprofits, I've worked with staff members in our organization at Redeemed, that watching them, how this affects them. So having that reality is very, very important. But the most important aspect of this is the action that you take. You have to find a way to commit yourself, again, to taking some kind of action. And always, every human being has this one dilemma, is we always think in grand terms. We have a grandiose idea of how we're going to serve this population of people. And so we think that, we're going to do these great things, but it really is the small things that make a difference in a person's life. It's the small things that will really influence the change in an individual. It's crazy that as executive director, when I was executive director of Redeemed, that my job was to go out and educate, but my job was also to fix toilets. Not something I expected, but I did it. Build bookshelves, move furniture. Listen to women cry about their experiences of their family who betrayed them and sold them for drugs, for food. And so the breadth of things that happen here is very important. So every little thing that we do makes a difference. Everything that people can involve themselves in makes a difference. In fact, this event right now, if you could see the number of people who are involved in just making this happen and doing the little things, has a great impact on a larger scale. You have to think about these things. We have to really play them in our mind. And how do I explore new opportunities for people to be involved? How do I explore new opportunities for women and children and men to be healed? Because we're still on the beginning edge of this fight. This is something that's been going on for decades, hundreds of years, and we've just scratched the surface. So we need, more than important than anything else of you, is your mind. Because there are things that we have not thought of yet that need to be a part of what we do. We have to be imaginative. We have to be thinking, again, of things that can open the doors for how women recover, how children recover, how men recover. What does their future look like? What is it going to look like for them beyond this? Because, again, it's never going to go away. But how do they live in a world of what they've experienced, of trying to avoid triggers, but never successfully doing that? How do you equip them so that when those dark days come, they have a support system, they have resources, they have a way of taking care of themselves, knowing that they have people who will support them. Opportunities for secondhand jobs, looking for ways that will really be meaningful to them. I'm always excited when working with a survivor and they're going to school and learning something new, because it's not just that, they're changing their destiny. And the great thing about that is they're empowered to do that. It is their choice to do that. It is something that moves them forward in society. And the farther they move into that future, the farther away their past lives. And the greater opportunity for them to be less affected by it. Because we need people to help them on that journey, to be committed to that. And finally, it's the people that we encounter in days like this and every day that we look for the solutions. We look for opportunities to solve the problems, to come together as a collective mind, one-mindedness, to address these things that really will change the landscape of this. It's how do we solve the problem of the demand issue? How do we change men's minds to the reality that women are not objects, children are not objects, other men are not objects, because That's really what media will do. Media will paint that picture. It is very important for us to solve these problems and change that. Next generation of children being grown up right now is to change their value, to help them understand the value of human beings. So how we interact with our own kids and those that are around us is very important. It's a part of solving the problems, the solutions. So again, these are things that are so incredible to us. Because if we change our mind, we can change the world, one person at a time. It is important that we take and talk to the people that we encounter every day and educate them. Take them from what they expect to the reality that is. Helping them understand that what they think it is, it's not. What they thought a woman would like is not what a woman wants. The reality of what trafficking looks like in the whole spectrum. It's how it's interconnected and how large it is. I'm always amazed when we look at the numbers. And the thing is, for me, what I think is that we're not even close to the actual numbers of victims out there. We only can see what's really exposed to us, but there is so much still that's hidden. And the more that we educate and look for solutions, the more likely is that we're going to actually contact those people who are hidden. It's an opportunity for us to engage in a way that is so important because everybody has a role in this. This is something, again, that I never expected. People ask me, why did you do this? And I said, I didn't have a choice. Once I was exposed to it, I had to do this. I had to change the direction of my life. The trajectory of my life had to adapt to what I was understanding. And for most people, it will affect you. You will change the direction of your life once you come in contact with it. You may not change your job, but you will change your mind. And again, if you change your mind in the right direction, you will make a difference in the world and you will affect somebody who needs your help. Thank you for this time together. Thank you very much.